is back. We'll tell you more about it coming up here. Let's head into the KUAM News Zoom room where we have Attorney General Leevin Camacho standing by. Good morning, AG.
Morning, Chris. Morning, Sabrina. Morning, Jason.
Let's go ahead and get right into it. I guess we wanted to start with what preparations are being made, because I know that we're going to the U.S. Supreme Court, right? So what's the status on that?
The Department of Justice filed their opposition brief, and we have one more chance to file something with the court, which will be about a week from today. And after that, our arguments are set for early morning Guam time on April 27th. Between then and now, we'll be meeting with our counsel, and we'll be doing some moot courts with them and basically preparing for the big show. But we're pretty, I feel pretty confident in the arguments we made. And I brought up last time, AG Manabusan was able to get 25 states and other territories to support our position. So we feel pretty good going forward that we're going to give it the best shot that we can and hopefully get back into the district court and be able to pursue our case to hold the Navy accountable and to pay their fair share.
Can you tell us a little bit about the firm that we're working with? Is it a firm?
This is so this case initiated or started under my predecessor, Attorney General Barrett Anderson, right. And the firm's Kelly Dry, and they were hired in, I believe, 2017 or 2018. And they're based out of Houston, Texas. So they have been the ones representing us from the trial court level all the way up to Supreme Court. So they're very familiar with the case and the facts. And that's, the issues are pretty straightforward, but they have expertise in this particular area about CERCLA and environmental law. So we're going to rely on them to handle the argument.
I understand you also have an update on child support garnishments.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as exciting necessarily for us as maybe Supreme Court, but last year our child support division, they collected over $4 million in garnishments to pay down outstanding child support amounts. And I know that was one of the things that I wanted to prioritize after being elected. So between our undistributed child support collections and UDC, millions of dollars last year got to families who were owed outstanding child support. I know that we've received questions about the garnishment process, and I think we've gone on and explained a bit, but the most popular question we get is, if I get a notice of garnishment, why does it take so long to get it paid out? And I guess I'll just explain the process. You'll get a notice of garnishment. That's just to say that there's an intent to do it. It doesn't mean there's actually cash or anything has actually happened. So we've had a great partnership with the Department of Revenue and Taxation and the Department of Administration. And as we know, when tax payments are paid out, that's when the funds are garnished. And then there may be a little bit more time because our office allows for 30 days worth of review to challenge your garnishment and to make sure that it's correct, all the information is accurate. But the amazing thing is that we garnished and collected $2.8 million more last year than we did the prior year. And really big kudos to our SDU unit. They were coming in throughout the entire pandemic because there were paper checks that they would have to process. And I know the Department of Administration as well. So during pandemic, they were coming in and they knew how important these funds were to get to families who are depending on these payments. So I'm very proud of our team and what they're able to accomplish last year.
I wanted to talk about the AG's office, you joining other attorneys general regarding stopping this effort on the sale of fake vaccination cards. And I'm just wondering if you received any sort of reports locally about this happening.
We haven't seen anything locally, Bree, but I can tell you that we are seeing travelers coming in with vaccination cards. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to acknowledge the great work that public health has been doing. We're 16 and above now. We're far ahead of the curve nationally. And now that we incentivize, if we say, we're going to, maybe May, if you come in with a vaccination card, you can bypass quarantine facility, you can go straight home. There's going to be more and more of an incentive to buy these fake cards. Yeah. I believe in California, you have to have a vaccine card in order to go into an indoor event. So we don't have a national way of monitoring who has been vaccinated and the accuracy of whether or not someone who's showing you a card. I mean, if you've seen the cards, they're very easy to forge. So that's the concern on our end, is that you're going to have folks coming to Guam who may now at this point be lying about whether they've been vaccinated and trying to bypass quarantine or to get in access into certain events. Mm-hmm. And I believe the FBI has been putting out warnings. So it sounds like the concern is real. Shopify already has responded saying that they're monitoring and they've already had to shut down the sale of these cards, and they're constantly reviewing keyword searches to make sure that if there are sales, they're going to take them down immediately.
Wow. Kind of seems like something we should have thought of, earlier on, huh, AG?
Yeah, so I think those cards are CDC. So you
Yeah.
know, we're doing our best to monitor, and it's just one of those things where, I mean, when did we start vaccinating? January.
Yeah.
So we're 3 months out, right? And of course, the speed and the urgency was there to get it out, to get our Manumco vaccinated, our first responders vaccinated. And I'm sure if we had more time to set up the perfect program to have a national, international database, we would have done it. But those are the kinds of policy interests that are competing. Is it more important to get vaccinated, or more important to devise a database or some kind of verified real ID, essentially?
Yeah.
I mean, even with real ID, look how long it took for all the states and Guam to get on board with that, to have a uniform way of verifying accuracy of information and identity.
It sure beats the old vaccination card, which was that funny scar on your upper arm, right?
Yeah, I mean, the yellow thing too, I know I would always have that problem, like, oh, have you had a tetanus shot? Like, man, I have no idea what kind of vaccines I've had. So luckily my wife is much better at organizing. I think like that's a mom thing where they have a binder with everything. I need to get
A
my
Bible
social
of the
security
shot
card.
records, right? Yeah.
I was like, Mom, do you have my social security card? She's like, yeah, I do. Let me pull it out of my binder. Like, why do you have my social security card? Like, that's what moms are for, right?
National Crime Victims' Rights Week, AG?
Yeah, it's going to be going on the week of April 18th through April 24th, I believe. And this year we're doing something new. We're having a wellness and fitness virtual challenge. So we have 14 teams that are signed up right now. You can find information on our website. And basically every minute you do an activity, it counts as a rep. And we have a friendly competition going on intra-office. We have about 5 or 6 teams from the community who have joined. Guam Coalition is always a great partner with this. I believe Sanctuary has a team. So it's all about just spreading awareness about Victims' Rights Weeks and our obligations and the services that we're providing to victims of crime and programs. So that week, I'm sure there are going to be more events to talk about and other outreaches that are going on. Mm-hmm. But we're very excited about doing something different and hopefully staying in shape for a good cause. So glad to promote that here.
Well, you
can find more information on our challenge on our website, oagguam.org. If it's not too late to sign up, if you guys want to put together a team.
I think as a triathlete, you probably have an unfair advantage over some of the rest of your staff. Like, they might not know what they're getting into.
We went out for a run yesterday with some of the folks here in the office, and we finished, and it was hot. And I said, the crazy thing is 30 minutes of walking scores the same as 30 minutes of running. So maybe next time we just go for a 40-minute walk instead, and the reps will be exactly the same. But Chris, on that, Carlina, our PIO, said, if you're going out and you're mowing your grass, put on your fitness tracker. Yeah. And even if you have the electronic assist, that's activity, and we'll reward it. So, yes, we're trying to keep it open to all abilities and ages.
I wanted to, AG, and this is something that I didn't anticipate asking about until we had the story yesterday, but relative to the Customs Director, Ike Pareto, had pled guilty to harassment as a petty misdemeanor. According to his plea agreement in July last year, he offensively tapped one of his female employees on the shoulder. He faced 60 days behind bars, but all were suspended. He must pay a $250 fine, plus all court costs and pay restitution. He's also allowed to remain the director, but must stay 500 feet away from the victim. He was charged with assault as a misdemeanor, but it was dismissed. Adeloop Communications Director Crystal Paco declined to comment on the matter, but if you could, AG, maybe, because I remember we had you on the last time and we were talking about some of these plea agreements, and you had said that people outside looking in, it might look one way, but that a lot of times these agreements are done with the victim, right? The involvement of the victim. So in this case, was the plea agreement reached with consent or anything with the victim?
Well, and Chris, just to clarify, so in any case, whether it's a director of an agency here or just someone out, a regular, typical person on the street, our prosecution division's mission is always the same, which is to pursue justice and to find out what really happened. So we charge out the case based on the information that we had. As part of our process, we would review all the evidence, we would talk to those who are involved, and we would also get input from the victim. Now, when we say input from the victim, that doesn't mean that a victim ultimately gets to decide. And I just want to clarify that, because sometimes you might have folks who may not like someone, and our office is there to promote justice, not to necessarily carry out. We're not there to necessarily carry out any personal feelings or vendettas between two individuals. So if we reviewed the case and we believed that we would be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt harassment, and that was what the evidence supported, then that would be the thought going into making that offer and that plea agreement.
What would you say to those who wonder why official misconduct wasn't thrown in there if this incident happened while Director Pareto was on the job?
For official misconduct, and I think the more we're unfortunately seeing of these allegations, and Chris, I will tell you, I share the community's concern about some of the allegations we're seeing about law enforcement, but there's a very big difference between a public official or law enforcement official using their position to commit a crime and someone doing something that they regret later on and they happen to be employed by the government of Guam. So in order to prove official misconduct, it's not that you're a government of Guam employee or that you're on the work premises. You have to look at what the elements are going to be. And I think benefit, you have to benefit in some way. That's one of the elements. I think there's also, I have to look at the statute again to refresh, but not everything that happens with a government employee is automatically official misconduct. So when we charged it out, we charged out, I believe, assault as a misdemeanor and petty and harassment, which it sounds like there was a verbal argument. There's allegations of a tap on the shoulder. Our prosecution team reviewed it, and then they made a determination that based on all the evidence available, again, harassment was the most accurate charge reflected in the conduct.
How involved are you guys in, so he's got to stay 500 feet away from the victim in the case? Do you guys go to the customs and kind of is it feasible, and who checks on that kind of stuff?
Well, the consequence of violating a court order is pretty significant. So you could potentially, the sentence you read out, and again, I apologize, Chris, I haven't read the plea agreement, okay, but the way you described it, it's a suspended 60-day sentence, which means if you violate any of the terms of that plea agreement, there is a chance that the judge is going to put you in jail for the balance of that period. So any defendant has all the interests in the world when you have a suspended sentence and complying. There's also a separate charge that you could be subject to if you violate a court order. And we see that oftentimes in family violence cases where there's a pretrial order to stay away or to not harass, and then they violate it. Then you're subject to not only additional charges and getting your probation revoked in your existing case, but a new criminal case for violating a court's order.
I guess, AJ, and you kind of alluded to that there may have been, and I'm just gleaning this from your comments in this interview a little earlier, that there may have been some kind of personal history between the director and the employee. But that being said, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I don't know I'm just kind of, I know contrary to, I don't handle, I think we talked about this before. We have a lot of things going on in the office.
Yeah.
And we're just talking about Supreme Court, child support. We do quite a bit here.
Right,
so
right.
I don't personally get into the weeds with every case,
right.
But I will tell you that just as a general rule, our prosecutors are required to get input from the victim, and we have to rely on our prosecutors and their discretion to make the right call and to make sure they're furthering justice. And that it's not easy. These prosecutors have very tough jobs when it's from rape all the way down to these types of cases. They take every one of them seriously.
I get it, but I guess just to quell any kind of public concern about this, because it is, on its face, you have a director and then you have a plea agreement. What do you feel that this case was prosecuted with total impartiality by the office, and that the director didn't get off easy or anything like that?
I think based on the conduct that I've heard, Chris, which is a verbal altercation was the primary charge, that harassment seems to be pretty accurate. Okay. I'll have to get briefed on my team about what the specific discussions were, but it would be a very different situation if, I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I wanted to ask about the Jerry's Kitchen incident or investigation, because we did have the chief of police on yesterday, and he was mentioning that he submitted the findings that he had to date to the AG's office, which I believe was on Monday, but he still had one more interview to conduct, which he planned, maybe not him, but his highway investigators, by the end of this week, which is, today. But I also asked him, why would you be submitting the findings to the AG's office for a case that's, an imprudent driving case? Do you have any information as to, or can you tell us what exactly is the extent of the involvement of the AG's office with this Jerry's Kitchens case?
You guys are kind of getting more information again than I am. I'm aware that there might have been some reports on the file. I'm unfamiliar with any specific findings that were submitted, and I can contact Chief after this to see what's been communicated to our office. But I think at the end of the day, Chief recognizes and we recognize that there has to be some systemic changes to the way that we're operating. The community, and I share this concern. We're seeing these allegations that things aren't being done. People aren't being investigated the same, right? If it was someone else, then things would have happened differently. Right. And if Chief is asking our office to get involved, it's because he understands that there's a question of whether or not the GPD is going to be conducting an impartial investigation. So he's going to make sure that our office has eyes on. And if there is anything that we find potentially irregular about their approach or their investigation, we'll have the opportunity at that point to ask for their assistance or to step in. But this is just part of the broader changes that we're all committed to at this point, which is ensuring that there's going to be transparency and the public is going to have faith that the processes that are in place are going to ensure that if law enforcement is involved and there are allegations against law enforcement, there is going to be an independent investigation and there's going to be an independent review of the findings from that investigation.
I see.
And that's the only way we can move forward. I mean, otherwise, if we play the same, everything's a secret, we're not going to comment on anything, the community is never going to trust our actions that are based on outcomes.
And speaking of, making sure that nothing is a secret, is the AG been asked or anything to review or evaluate what's happening over at the Chamorro Land Trust Commission?
Well, this is again one of those things that, as I know, we get brought up a lot, and as much as we do have control over a lot of activities, we provide legal services to these agencies. So we're there to provide counsel to the Chamorro Land Trust. My understanding is that there's been question over whether or not they can meet in executive session to discuss an investigation or a complaint made by one employee against another employee. Right. And that's expressly provided for by the open government law. And I know there was another question over whether or not investigative reports are required to be disclosed. And under our FOIA laws, that's another express exemption. So, I know Assistant Attorney General Toft, who is assigned to these at Chamorro Land Trust in particular, he's there. He's going to give guidance. I believe this whole thing started as a result of him saying, we've given an opinion and this type of transfer, you can't do it. And then that was it. It changed the course of what was going on in that case. So he's done his job, and it's up to the Chamorro Land Trust at that point to decide what they want to do. If the law allows for them to conduct executive sessions, if it allows for them to withhold disclosing investigative reports, that's a decision made by the commission and not anything that our office can necessarily come in and say, yes, you're not violating the law, but you really should do this for policy reasons. We're going to have to defer to the commissioners on that.
Okay. Yeah, it sounded as though they had completed their investigation. Yeah. It was just that nobody really knew, well, what did you find, right? Was it an isolated incident where they were the director was making switches on these, deeds? Yeah. So, nobody really kind of knows what happened. And I think for the land agents that work there that were questioned, and all the staff that were questioned, it just would seem fair that they would know, and also the public would know, and lessees would know, well, what was the end result? So we had the speaker on yesterday, and I think that she kind of compared what's happening at the land trust to what had happened with the CCU and the raises being discussed in executive session, and then she kind of name dropped your office too. So maybe if you could, AG, what is the difference between what's happening at the Chamorro Land Trust today? With executive session being used to discuss these allegations being raised against a sitting director versus what happened to the CCU when they went into executive session to give themselves raises?
The difference, Chris, would be that the law actually says you can meet in executive session to investigate an employee, one employee's complaint against another. And then the next sentence is, under no circumstances shall you, however, discuss salary adjustments or pay raises. So when the CCU issue came up, that was what we showed them. I mean, the law is unambiguous here. You cannot give raises in executive session. That is the one thing you are required to take and to have public discussion. But the investigation for any kind of personnel matters, that is expressly authorized by the statute, which provides for executive session. So the difference is really the law provides for one and it expressly prohibits the other.
So you think people are confused, senators, and are just confused about what the law for executive session allows?
No, I think it goes back to what we're talking about is faith in government.
Right.
They have the same interests that we do. And I mean, right now, let's just be honest, there's a lot of distrust in the way the government operates. I mean, you guys have done a lot of stories on this, and I go back to processes, because if we can't tell the public what the process is, then you can't have faith in the outcome. If all you're seeing is, oh, we can't give it out, how do we know what's been going on leading up to that point? So one of the things that I'm really hoping to work with Chief and our law enforcement is start building out some of these processes. And I'll give you an example. We had an officer involved shooting. Our office investigated. We did an independent review. We actually presented to the grand jury, but we realized during the course of that one incident that there has never been anything in writing as to how these cases are going to be handled and reviewed. And we're working with GPD now, and hopefully we'll get other law enforcement on board to sign a written MOU or SOP that if there's ever this type of situation, our office is immediately contacted and involved and takes a lead in it, so that we can start rebuilding the community's trust in, okay, I know that if this type of force is used, the AG's office is going to get involved, and our position is going to be any incident that results in death or serious physical injury, we're going to present to the grand jury. And I know that might be something that people are a little bit confused on, but in any felony case, when you present to a grand jury 16 to 23 people, and then their job is to decide based on the evidence whether or not probable cause exists that a crime was committed. And my understanding is that our office has not presented, this most recent case was the first time in 13 years or so that we had presented a similar case. So, we're hoping to make it, going back to, we want to make sure the community has faith that there will be an objective review at the end of the day of these types of cases. But it starts with writing. We're going to work on a draft. We're going to make it publicly available. So if it happens, you guys can say, okay, where are you guys at in the process? What steps are we at? And we should be able to answer those types of questions. Those are very fair questions.
I wanted to follow up on something else. There's a case before the Guam Supreme Court regarding the governor's Organic Act powers, essentially saying the judicial branch, you don't have the power to tell me basically what to do when it comes to quarantining individuals. And the Emergency Health Powers Act, she feels that's also inorganic. Is the AG's office involved in this case at all? And have they provided a position on this?
We filed a brief at the same time that the legislature filed a brief, and I believe public defender filed a brief. And our position has been the same from when this case started, which is we believe public health officials should be the one making public health policy decisions for the island of Guam. And it's turned into an argument now between the governor and the legislature. But our interests come down to, we've had several cases where a judge has reviewed a case and decided to release people or to not release people based on her assessment of science and evidence, and we just don't think it's appropriate. We believe that those types of decisions should be left to doctors and should be left to our public health officials. So that's the position we've taken, and we'll see what happens. I think the court's going to hear that in a month or so.
Can we get an update on the landlord tenant stuff? Is now evictions are allowed? Are they? Yeah.
Commercial evictions are allowed, and I believe evictions are allowed except for based on the failure, non-payment of rent.
Right. So you got to blast. If you're blasting your music, your landlord can evict you if it's against the rules, but not if you're late on your rent.
Yeah, I think that yes, I mean, there are all kinds of other reasons why you might be evicted. I mean, I think we're at the point now too where a lot of leases, if it's a year, maybe naturally, and we get a lot of those questions too. My lease agreement was up, my landlord did not extend or renew, and we're having to explain that's not an eviction. That's unfortunately, you're put in a position, but you have to find another place. That's just the contract has expired, and they don't have to go in and necessarily file anything to terminate it. It terminates by the terms of the agreement.
Have you guys gotten a lot of complaints or just calls from like tenants or landlords about these types of issues?
We have, and Ben Pahokee at our consumer division has been the primary point of contact, and I know he's been very involved. He's drafted some letters to provide to both landlords and tenants. Tenants in terms of knowing what your rights are. Landlords too. I think we mentioned this the last time we were on, but most of the calls are actually coming from landlords who don't want to violate the executive order and want to make sure they're doing things properly. So we've distributed letters to landlords and tenants. I think things as they evolve, we've been trying to point people to different programs that need to be available. As we mentioned, if someone has now lost their lease, there may be programs out of, I don't know if it's Gura or there's a few other, maybe Gita, there's a few programs that are out there for financial assistance for both renters as well as landlords. There's mortgage assistance that's out there. So we're really trying to facilitate getting those types of resources available to people who are impacted by the public health emergency.
What about fraud? I know that in discussions with the labor director, David Del Sola, he's mentioned that he's forwarded complaints not just to the feds, but also to the local AG's office. Do you have any updates regarding that?
We filed one case, I believe, a week or two ago, and I think the most important thing is this program is meant to help people. Please don't lie, don't steal from the folks who need this assistance. And if you do, you're going to get caught, and it's not going to end well for you. So please just respect the program. And we are only going to file where it's pretty clear that there was criminal intent involved. I believe the first case that we filed, someone forged their business documents to make it seem as though they're unemployed, and it was clearly a forgery to get benefits. So we're actively investigating a few other cases, and we'll provide those to you once we file. And I'll leave it at that. But we're going to take action, and it's only right. I mean, again, these programs are really meant to help folks who have been impacted by the public health emergency pandemic.
So how does that, if it's like a federal, the federal monies, and then they get it on the federal side, is like the local prosecution like a cherry on top, or does it just, how does that work?
Well, I believe that Department of Labor, they're either going to look at different thresholds or what different crimes what it would constitute under federal law and local law. In some cases, the consequences may be bigger under local law, believe it or not, depending on the amount involved. I believe that the federal case that was filed was actually against a Department of Labor employee, right, which changed the nature. It wasn't someone trying to get benefits. It was someone who was basically within the system itself, and then creating these programs and getting them out. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to divvy it up, but I can say that we have been investigating beneficiaries who have basically lied or committed some kind of fraud on their applications, and that's what that's our focus at this point.
Are you seeing, I mean, I know you can't give away too much, but are you seeing are there like people who are well off who are getting these benefits, or is it people who just barely qualified, or is it just everybody?
That I don't know. I can tell you that the cases that I've heard about, it's pretty clear, and some of it's pretty egregious in terms of the conduct to try to get these payments and get this money. So, just do the right thing. I know that Department of Labor is dealing with reviewing claims and making sure that they're accurate. So an innocent mistake or someone not knowing that they did something wrong, those are not the kinds of cases that are going to get referred to our office. It's going to be something where it's clear you knew what you were doing and you intentionally tried to defraud the Department of Labor and to get these benefits illegally.
We've been following this story with online gambling by Guam employees. We had the airport executive manager confirming that he was contacted by the Secret Service. GPD confirmed that they were contacted by the Secret Service. The Port Authority, they put out a press release, said that they were contacted by the FBI. Has the Attorney General's office been contacted by any federal law enforcement agency giving you guys a heads up or about their federal investigation?
I can't comment, Bree, on anything ongoing at this point, but we're aware of the allegations that are out there, and I can assure you that if we're in a position to pursue criminal charges against folks who are doing something wrong, we're prepared to do so.
You can't confirm that you've been contacted or that your office has been contacted?
I can confirm that we are actively investigating allegations against law enforcement, but in terms of the specifics of it, this is where, yeah, I mean, it's funny, I start talking about transparency, but then we kind of fall back into this thing where I can't really comment on it. But there's a process that we're going to go through, and what I can say is that when we're at the point where local charges can be filed based on a violation of our laws, we're going to be prepared to take that action.
So that was that. Oh, go ahead.
But it is involving allegations of online gambling with law enforcement officials.
That's my understanding, Bree.
Okay.
So AG, that's that one issue, the online gambling and what you just said. But then there was also, I don't know if it was a joint release you had come out with Chief Steve Ignacio, and this was relative to investigating law enforcement, specifically dealing with some of these allegations that come out of the federal court. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I do.
Yeah.
And going back to earlier, Chris, we've been busy, and Chief's been busy. So be nice to Chief, because we have a lot of balls in the air right now. So there's a lot happening here, and unfortunately, really, it kind of goes back to law enforcement and our trust, and we entrust them to keep our community safe. So when there are allegations made about criminal conduct being engaged in by those who have taken an oath to protect and to serve, it bothers everyone. And we put that release out just to assure folks that we're not sitting on our hands. Whether it's anything that you guys are talking about, we are taking steps on the local side to ensure that we're doing our best to stay involved and to be aware. And if we get to the point again where there are local charges that we can pursue, we're going to take that action.
Is there a strain at all on like how many investigators you have and all these different issues that you guys are investigating?
Well, we typically don't investigate on the front end. We rely a lot on GPD to do that work. And that's, again, put Chief in a position because the allegations are there may be some GPD officers that are involved in it. So we have a very strong working relationship with Chief. He understands the importance of ensuring that all these investigations are going to be conducted independently. He has offered the assistance of his office or his department to provide additional resources, and we will take him up on that. But we are in trial nonstop from the start of this year once we opened up. So we are tight on our resources, but this is a matter of great importance to our office, and we're going to continue doing our job and making it a priority to rebuild again the community's trust in law enforcement and the criminal justice system as a whole.
Have you guys put in a request for any of the $660 million in American Rescue Plan funding?
We haven't. I mean, we obviously it's always going to be good to get additional funds, but we're going about business with our budget and trying to make things happen. And if any of the money comes down the pike, then that's great, and we'll find a way to build out our infrastructure in the office and set ourselves up for long term. But we're not counting on anything, and hopefully that changes. But we're not prepare for the worst and hope for the best, right? So we'll see fiscally. I know we're already 2 quarters into this fiscal year, and on top of all the things that we're doing, you just reminded me operationally, we have a multi-million-dollar agency that our team is charged with running and making sure we have the resources to investigate all the things you guys are talking about. We actually had our Supreme Court argument on Wednesday on the gaming case, the gambling game machines.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that will hopefully be the last argument in the case, and it's going to hopefully be resolved after that. And our Assistant Attorney General, Marianne Woloschuk, has done a great job handling that for years now. But I think we're very close to having some finality in that case. So there is a lot going on that our office is involved in, including the bulk of what you will be familiar with, which is the criminal prosecution and investigation.
Did you guys have a shortfall last year?
What was that, Chris?
Did you guys have a shortfall? Because I know that all the agencies are kind of like, "Hey, Gov, we had a $2 million shortfall because we're getting this money."
I think we had no money other than rent and salaries and benefits. So we were able to. The only way that we were able to operate this year was because we were authorized to use last year's carryover of $200,000. So all of our tech, all of our phones, everything's being paid from last year's budget carryover. And I think we're going to be in the same position where warm bodies and rent is going to eat up most of our budget. But I don't imagine us having any. We don't have a ton of money to play with. Yeah, I mean not play with, but to make work. And again, I'm proud of our team for on the tech side. We have a couple other exciting things coming up that we're going to keep pushing. Because this is the new. I'm not going to say new normal because I know Chris, you can accuse me about that.
Don't say it.
I was close. I
know.
But tech is going to be the way, and I think we talked about this before with Jason. Like it's forced the government of Guam to modernize. You're seeing more things online, more things being pushed online, and unfortunately, it's taken these types of circumstances for us to realize that Zoom and Google Meet sometimes are just as effective as other means of communication. But we're going to continue to build out our tech infrastructure and see how we can maximize that in terms of efficiency and public outreach. I think public facing. We have a couple exciting projects. I know Director Shimazu has been very good with Rev and Tax and being more stuff that's available online to do. Right. So we hope to follow that.
I guess last question before we let you go, AG. Thank you for your time this morning, as I know Bree had a request about Oxycontin.
Yeah, was there anything new with that settlement? I know that we were getting money from that.
We have worked out, and we will be getting in touch with you very soon about an update on that. We have some pretty exciting partnerships with our local service providers as well as our other government agencies and partners, and how those funds are going to be used.
Okay. Well, stay tuned.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's called clickbait.
For the next one.
I know. Got it. Thank you, AG, for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank
you guys.
Have a good weekend.
Take care.
There you go. Attorney General Leevin Camacho, 9/12 on Friday, April 9th. I want to welcome aboard our friends at King's. We're so excited and happy and proud to partner up with this great segment that we have. I'm not usually one to take the credit for things, but this is my idea.